Daniel Carter sat alone inside a small research trailer in the middle of the desert. He heard heavy breathing behind him. The breathing echoed through the quiet trailer. Daniel froze and listened carefully. He stared at the monitoring desk filled with glowing screens. Every camera showed empty desert fields. The trailer felt dark and silent. Only the hum of electronics filled the room. Daniel felt as if something was standing right behind his chair. The uneasy feeling made his heart race. His eyes stayed fixed on the flickering monitors. Fear slowly spread across his face. With hesitation, Daniel slowly turned his head. He prepared himself to look behind him, but when he looked back, the trailer was empty. Nothing stood behind his chair. The monitoring equipment continued blinking quietly. Everything appeared normal again. Yet the strange feeling remained inside the room. Daniel couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Daniel arrived at the remote desert ranch. Maya Alvarez and Ethan Brooks joined him. Maya and Ethan stood beside the trailer, unloading cameras and gear. The quiet desert surrounded them. The three investigators discussed the strange reports from the ranch. Locals had seen unexplained activity at night. The desert landscape stretched endlessly around them. Distant hills stood beneath the moonlight. Witnesses had reported strange glowing lights in the sky. Others claimed something moved across the fields at night. Ranch animals had been behaving strangely for weeks. Many refused to enter certain areas of the land. Some people even claimed to see a tall shadow on the distant hills. No one knew what it was. The investigators suspected there might be an unknown explanation. Their equipment would record anything unusual. Daniel reviewed his investigation notes inside the trailer. He prepared the monitoring system. Maya explained the plan to document everything on camera. They would record the entire night. Inside the trailer, Maya prepared her camera equipment. She began testing the recording devices. She carefully reviewed the first footage on her camera screen. Everything appeared to be working. Nearby, Ethan Brooks checked the monitoring systems. He verified that all sensors were connected. Ethan walked into the desert field carrying a motion sensor. He placed it carefully on the ground. Next, he set up a thermal camera on a tripod. The device faced the dark hills.
Ethan continued installing equipment across the property. Cameras and sensors quietly watched the land. Soon the ranch was covered with monitoring devices. Every corner of the desert was under observation. Inside the trailer, the team tested their system together. Rows of monitors displayed live camera feeds. The investigators waited while watching the screens. At first, nothing unusual happened. Outside, the desert ranch slowly grew quieter. The night air felt strangely still. A gentle desert wind moved across the dry grass. The empty land stretched under the night sky. Then, the distant sounds of animals suddenly stopped. The silence felt unnatural. An eerie stillness settled across the ranch. Even the wind seemed to fade. The investigators returned to the trailer to monitor the equipment. The screens glowed in the dark room. Suddenly, a motion sensor activated. An alert flashed on one of the monitors. Daniel quickly noticed the flashing warning signal. He leaned closer to the screen. The triggered sensor was located near a dry creek bed. Something had moved there. Daniel opened the live camera feed connected to the sensor. The monitor filled with grainy night footage. The black and white surveillance image flickered slightly. The desert field appeared empty. The camera showed quiet land under faint moonlight. Nothing moved across the field. The surveillance camera continued showing the empty field. Daniel watched the screen carefully. Tall grass slowly swayed in the night wind. The landscape remained silent. Long shadows stretched across the uneven desert ground. The moonlight barely illuminated the field. Something suddenly moved at the far edge of the camera frame. The motion was distant but noticeable. Daniel leaned closer to the monitor. He tried to understand what he was seeing. A tall figure slowly stepped out from behind the bushes. Its shape appeared almost human. The figure stood motionless in the field. It seemed unusually tall. As the camera zoomed slightly, its body proportions looked unnatural. Its arms hung far lower than normal. The tall figure stood alone in the open desert. The stillness around it felt disturbing. Its long arms nearly reached its knees. The figure remained completely still. Daniel quickly switched one monitor to thermal camera mode. The screen began loading the heat display. The thermal interface flickered as it activated. Heat patterns slowly appeared on the screen. The tall figure appeared as a faint thermal outline. Its shape stood clearly against the cold desert. Strange heat patterns appeared across the figure's body. The readings fluctuated unevenly. Some parts of the figure glowed faintly with warmth. Other areas showed almost no heat. Large sections of the body appeared completely cold. The thermal readings made no sense. Daniel noticed something disturbing about the head. The thermal image showed it completely dark. The head looked hollow on the thermal display. It appeared colder than the surrounding ground. The tall figure stood still and faced the camera. It seemed aware of the surveillance. The figure slowly turned its head toward the camera lens. It looked as if it was staring directly at them. Suddenly, the surveillance image burst into heavy static. The signal began breaking apart. Glitching lines warped across the monitor. The camera feed struggled to stay active. The screen suddenly went completely black. The camera signal had disappeared. Inside the trailer, the investigators felt the atmosphere change. The room became tense and quiet. Daniel quickly checked the system diagnostics. He searched for the cause of the signal failure. Another motion sensor suddenly triggered on the system map. A new alert flashed on the monitor. The alert appeared much closer to the trailer. Something was moving toward them. Daniel opened another live camera feed. The monitor displayed a distant part of the ranch. The tall figure appeared again on the new camera view. It stood far across the desert field. The figure was several hundred meters away, but it was facing directly toward the trailer. The tall figure slowly began walking across the desert. Its movements were slow and steady. From the camera view, the distant shape moved closer. The dark landscape surrounded it. The figure continued walking toward the small research trailer. Its path remained straight. Each step looked slow and deliberate. The movement felt unnatural. The creature's body moved with strange stiffness. Its posture looked slightly wrong. Its motion resembled human walking, but not perfectly. Something about it felt unnatural. The thermal camera struggled to track the figure. The heat display flickered repeatedly. The head remained completely cold on the thermal screen. The dark area stayed unchanged. Parts of the body faded in and out of the heat display. The thermal image became unstable. Suddenly, the surveillance camera distorted again. The monitor filled with interference. The tall figure suddenly vanished from the camera frame. The empty field remained on the screen. The surveillance camera now showed nothing unusual. Only the quiet desert landscape remained. Multiple motion sensors suddenly triggered across the monitoring system. Alert signals appeared across the digital map. Daniel stared at the screen as the alerts multiplied. Something was moving across the ranch. The monitoring map showed a pattern forming. The triggered sensors traced a moving path. The alerts created a line leading directly toward the trailer. Whatever moved was getting closer. Ethan quickly checked the equipment readings. The system confirmed the sensors were functioning correctly. Electromagnetic readings suddenly spiked on one monitor. The graph began fluctuating wildly. Several devices abruptly lost connection. Signals disappeared from the system display. Sensors continued triggering one after another. Something unseen was passing through the area. A final motion sensor activated very close to the trailer. The alert blinked beside the trailer marker. A small sensor near the trailer began flashing. Its signal confirmed movement nearby. Suddenly, every monitor inside the trailer shut off. The room was plunged into darkness. Computers and equipment powered down simultaneously. The trailer fell silent. The interior became completely dark. Only faint shapes of equipment remained visible. The three investigators sat quietly in the darkness. None of them spoke. Then a faint scraping sound began outside the trailer. It slowly moved along the metal wall. Something unseen was moving along the side of the trailer. The sound circled around the structure. Long scratching noises dragged across the metal surface. The sound echoed through the silent night. The presence continued moving around the trailer. The investigators remained frozen in fear. After several minutes, Daniel restarted the monitoring system. The computer slowly began powering on. The monitors flickered back to life one by one. Soft light returned to the room. A security camera feed appeared on one screen. It showed the ground outside the trailer door. The camera displayed dusty desert soil under moonlight. The ground looked undisturbed at first. Then something unusual became visible. Fresh footprints appeared in the dust. The prints were large and deeply pressed into the ground. They looked far bigger than a human's. The footprints had an unfamiliar shape. Their form didn't match any known animal. The trail of footprints led directly toward the trailer. Each step approached the entrance. The final footprints stopped beside the trailer wall. They ended only a few feet from the door. There were no footprints leading away. The trail simply ended. The strange footprint trail remained beside the trailer door. The dust around it was completely still. By morning, the ranch looked peaceful again. Sunlight spread across the quiet desert. Inside the trailer, the monitoring equipment sat inactive. The long night had finally ended. The surveillance screens showed normal camera feeds again. Nothing unusual appeared outside. The ranch looked calm under the morning light. It was hard to believe what happened during the night. Sunlight slowly spread across the empty desert land. The hills looked peaceful again. The investigators stepped outside the trailer. They began examining the ground. The strange footprints were still clearly visible. They remained pressed deep in the soil. The trail ended suddenly beside the metal trailer wall. There was still no sign of where it went. The investigators searched the surrounding area. They found no trace of anything leaving. Later, Maya reviewed the investigation footage. She carefully watched the recordings on her laptop. She studied every moment from the night. Most cameras had shut off during the blackout, but one small camera kept recording inside the trailer. It had continued filming during the power failure. The dark screen of a monitor reflected part of the room. The investigators were barely visible in the reflection. Then Maya noticed something in the reflection. A tall, shadowy shape appeared behind them. The the figure stood silently inside the trailer. It remained completely still. The recording showed the investigators talking quietly. Behind them, the tall, shadowy figure watched. Suddenly, the video recording stopped. The final frame froze on the screen. The trailer appeared empty when they checked again. Nothing was inside the room. Outside, the lone research trailer stood quietly in the desert, and no one could explain how the figure had entered or left.